What if the loneliness so many Americans feel isn't a personality flaw, but an infrastructure failure? Imagine a loneliness that isn't simply personal sorrow, but a sign that something in the way towns, schools, and workplaces are built has changed. Nearly half of adults in the United States report feeling lonely. Young people are more isolated than any previous generation, and one of the biggest reasons may be something most of us don't think about anymore: the disappearance of third places. A neighborhood cafe sits on a quiet block. Wooden tables, mismatched chairs, a barista calling out names, an afternoon light that slants across the room. People read newspapers and laptops. Two neighbors share a gentle laugh. An older woman thumbs a paperback. Ray Oldenburg coined the term third place for spaces that are neither home, the first place, nor work, the second place. Third places are informal and accessible. Coffee shops, libraries, parks, faith communities, barber shops, places where conversation flows without an agenda, where status softens, where people who might otherwise remain strangers become familiar faces. Over time, these places stitched together civic trust, offered low-cost ways to meet neighbors, and gave people a sense of belonging outside their jobs and families. Picture a 1950s town square, a soda fountain at noon, kids on bicycles, a hardware store with a bell on the door. People drift into civic groups, schools host bake sales, and churches anchor social life. Post-war suburbanization, the rise of automobile culture, and new patterns of consumer life changed where and how people gathered. Independent retail stores were replaced by national chains. Urban design prioritized speed and convenience, larger roads, more parking lots, and zoning that separated homes from shops and workplaces. Participation in local organizations and church attendance declined. Public life became thinner. Spaces that once invited casual meeting became privatized or vanished entirely, leaving fewer places where unplanned human contact could flourish. A young adult sits alone in a dim apartment, the blue glow of a phone the only light. The image has become familiar in statistics and in quiet kitchen table conversations. In 2023, the U.S. Surgeon General issued a public health advisory on loneliness. Nearly 1 in 2 adults reports measurable loneliness. Social isolation increases the risk of premature death by roughly 29%. Some studies compare its health impact to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Loneliness is not just emotional discomfort, it is biological stress. The body responds with elevated inflammation, disrupted sleep, and higher cardiovascular risk. That stress is cumulative, and it shows up in clinics, classrooms, and communities. Inside a public high school classroom, a group of teenagers edges into their seats. One student sits slightly apart, fingers tracing the edge of a notebook. Adolescence is a time when identity is malleable and public spaces matter. Nancy Rappaport argues that adolescents need psychologically safe environments to develop resilience. Schools that function solely as performance systems, measuring achievement by grades and tests, can strip away the informal spaces where young people experiment with identity, try on different social roles, and find casual supports. Nakkula emphasizes that identity develops through relational reflection. Teenagers discover who they are by being seen by others, a peer's compliment, a teacher's brief acknowledgement, a recurring presence at a community center. In these moments of recognition, young people internalize how they are perceived: capable, valued, funny, dependable, and gradually weave those reflected appraisals into a more stable sense of self, learning not only how they appear to others, but also who they believe themselves to be becoming. Without third places, those everyday mirrors disappear, and identity formation becomes more fragile. When a young person's sphere of interaction narrows to a small number of online contacts or a limited school cohort, the real-world opportunities to fail safely, to belong awkwardly, and to learn through repetition shrink. Now an after-school circle forms in a gym or a classroom. Students sit in a ring, a facilitator guiding discussion with a steady, calm presence. Sean Kelly's research shows that peer influence is not only powerful but can be protective. Thriving spreads socially. When a group has norms of kindness and mutual support, those norms propagate. Tamar Mendelson demonstrates that protective peer communities significantly reduce depression among urban youth. Community relationships help regulate stress by offering predictable social rhythms. The person who says hello at the bus stop, the mentor who checks in after a hard day, and these small patterns add up to resilience. Conversely, isolation ramps up stress and narrows options for help when it's needed. A university walkway. Students pass each other with earbuds in, heads down, screens glowing. Empathy isn't a fixed trait you either have or don't. Jamil Zaki describes it as a skill that benefits from practice. Daily, low-stakes encounters with people different from oneself are the practice ground for that skill. Third places provided these small exposures: a stranger's different accent, a neighbor's unfamiliar habits, a conversation with someone of another background. These moments tune social perception and build the muscle of understanding. Digital interactions sometimes broaden networks, but often narrow the scope of perspective, because algorithms amplify content that confirms existing beliefs. Without embodied contact, empathy can atrophy. The consequence is not simply politeness lost. It's the erosion of a civic capacity to see and respond to the needs of people who are not like us. A seminar room where students lean in, trading ideas across cultural lines. Jaffrey Cohen's work shows that belonging uncertainty, the nagging sense that one might not fit, affects concentration, learning, and stress. Small environmental signals matter: inclusive language on a syllabus, images that reflect diverse identities, a teacher's explicit invitation to participate. Those signals create what researchers call identity safety. Historically, third places offered informal identity safety by allowing people to be recognized and accepted in routine interactions. Today, many young people report persistent uncertainty about where they fit. In a world with fewer casual meeting places, the chance to experience repeated, uncomplicated acceptance diminishes, and belonging becomes something to seek out intentionally rather than stumble into. In an urban classroom, a teacher threads culturally relevant examples into a lesson. References that reflect students' lives and communities. Christopher Emden and Deborah Rivas Drake emphasize that validating lived cultural experiences strengthens ethnic racial identity and reduces stress for underserved youth. Third places have often supported culturally specific gathering. Community centers, churches, barbershops, and local festivals provide a context where culture is reinforced through everyday practice. When these gathering spots decline due to economic pressure, zoning changes, or displacement, the burden of loneliness falls unevenly. Undersourced communities often lose informal networks of care and affirmation first, and the protective effects of cultural belonging erode. The same school building that holds classrooms by day hosts an evening community meeting. Parents and neighbors gather for a workshop. A local artist sets up a table. Kids run through the hallways. Schools can become modern third places. Patrick McClure points to the power of strong teacher-student relationships as bridges of trust. Howard Adelman argues that schools should evolve into integrated support systems, offering services beyond education, mental health resources, community events, and safe spaces for after-school interaction. But this transformation requires intention. Connection can't be accidental. It must be structured into timetables, funding, and the physical design of space. When schools open their doors beyond daytime hours, they become neighborhood anchors, restoring opportunities for micro-connections and relational continuity. A community mental health circle convenes in a bustling city elsewhere in the world. Different faces, different language, the same sense of people gathering in a shared time and place. Lena Verdelli's work shows that strengthening community networks reduces depression across cultures. Connection functions as preventive medicine in many settings. Loneliness is not uniquely American, yet the particular trajectory of declining civic infrastructure in the United States, sprawling suburbs, fragmented public transit, privatized leisure, has accelerated the spread of isolation. Lessons from other countries suggest that deliberate policies to maintain and create communal rhythms can blunt loneliness on a population scale. A suburban landscape stretches wide: highways, isolated houses behind fences, shops clustered in shopping centers, sidewalks that fade away. Urban sprawl and car dependency reduce accidental encounters. When destinations are separated by vehicle trips rather than walkable blocks, the chance for spontaneous conversation declines. Remote work, accelerated by technology and by a global pandemic, also reduces daily exposure to coworkers. Social media fills some social space, but often in a curated, shallow way. When architecture and policy discourage being together, loneliness scales. Design shapes behavior. Wide arterial roads and zoning laws that separate living from shopping limit the conditions that create third places. Conversely, mixed-use neighborhoods, smaller blocks, and transit connectivity invite the incidental meetings that form social glue. A group of neighbors stands in front of an empty storefront. Paint cans, folding tables, a small team of volunteers. Rebuilding third places does not require nostalgia for an imagined past. It requires intentional design and modest investment. Libraries can program events, and be flexible with space. Schools can host evening language classes, art shows, or communal dinners. Community cafés with shared tables encourage conversation. Policy can support mixed-use zoning and incentives for small businesses. Planners can prioritize sidewalks, parks, and transit. Nonprofits can seed micro-grants to help local projects get off the ground. Jeffrey Cohen's insight is practical. Belonging grows when environments explicitly communicate. You matter here. That message can be embedded in small choices, a sign that says all are welcome, a staff member tasked with outreach, an event calendar that highlights diverse activities. These things signal that a space is safe for repeated interaction, which is the condition under which trust and identity are rebuilt. Back at the cafe, a barista remembers a customer's name and calls it with a smile. Two people share a laugh over spilled sugar. A regular nods to a newcomer. Loneliness rarely disappears through grand gestures. It shifts through micro-connections. Eye contact, a small favor returned, shared laughter over nothing important. Third places multiply these moments by providing predictable, low-cost contexts where small social rituals can repeat. Each repetition lowers the friction of connection and raises the odds that someone in need will be noticed and offered help. The cafe is fuller now, voices layering into a warm, familiar hum. The moment feels ordinary and fragile, a small reminder of what public life can be when it's thoughtfully shaped to welcome people in. Loneliness is not weakness, it is information. It tells us that our shared spaces and connections need care and repair. Third places historically carried the invisible labor of belonging. If communities design for connection again, in schools, neighborhoods, and public life, they strengthen not just individual mental health, but the foundations of civic life and democracy itself. If you're curious to explore more, related recordings and readings are available in our playlist. Subscribing lets you continue this educational journey, and your engagement helps guide future content. Thank you for learning with us.